All right, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the differences between the charge of the nucleus and the charge of the atom. As always, got to have your handy dandy periodic table so we can get after it. Okay? So, just so we are clear, atoms have there's two different charges in atoms that you need to know in the 8th grade. The first one is the easy one. What's the charge of the nucleus? Okay, so we're going to talk about that now. The charge of the nucleus, so when we're considering the nucleus, there's two particles inside the nucleus. We have your protons and your neutrons. Your protons are positive, your neutrons are no charge. So the protons are the particle that charges the nucleus. The neutrons do not. So the key is, how many protons does this element have, or this atom has? That's what tells us the charge of the nucleus. So if we're talking about boron, it's 5. If we're talking, or plus 5. If we're talking about fluorine, it's going to be plus 9. If we're talking about argon, it's going to be plus 18. So it really is just that easy, and the charge of the nucleus can only be positive. So there always has to be a plus. So if the question states, what is the charge of aluminum? 13 plus 13 minus 13 or plus 27? The answer is plus 13. You look at the atomic number, you put a plus in front of it, bang, you have the charge of the nucleus, also called the con. I call it the con. If you're trying to find the con, charge of the nucleus. Really simple. Examples would be plus 5, plus 17, plus 25. Plus 25 would be for manganese, transition metal. So that's a perfect point. Let's transition over to charge of the atom now. Okay? Charge of the atom is a little different. One thing you can look at that will help you is, if you're talking about periodic table, just kind of identifying it, you can figure out what group it's in. So if we're talking about sulfur, and we know that if sulfur was going to react, the charge of the atom would be -2 because it's in group 6. Remember, nonmetals collect electrons to form negative ions. And an ion is simply an element that has either gained or lost electrons. Metals will lose electrons to form positive ions, and nonmetals will gain electrons to form negative ions. And this is time for some story time. So I'm going to pull up a chair. Okay? I'm going to tell you guys a little story. So when you're thinking about, if maybe you're getting confused right now. Maybe you're not sure, well, how do I know, if you're gaining something, how do I know if it's positive or negative? It's a very simple analogy. I'll tell it to you like this. Let's say that you have a group of friends, and you have a group of friends that are bad influences on you. What's going to happen to you? Yeah, you're probably going to become not the best version of yourself. You'll probably become a more negative person, doing things that you probably shouldn't do because you're being influenced by those negative people. Think of that situation as nonmetals. They are collecting bad friends, for example, electrons, and becoming more negative because they're bringing on that negativity in their life. Versus if you were to surround yourself with good friends and positive people, you would become more positive, just like metals. They are getting rid of the bad influences in their life, and they're becoming more positive. They are getting rid of negatively charged electrons and becoming more positive. Maybe that will help you clear up, when you're trying to decide, if an atom is positive or negative when it gains or loses electrons. Maybe that will help. Okay, so back to the the lecture at hand here, the little power lecture, we're talking about charges of atoms. The best thing you can do is compare the protons and electrons. And if the protons are winning, let's say we're talking about fluorine, nope. Let's say we're talking about sodium, for example, where the 8 is 11, and it's going to have 11 protons. Let's say it lost that electron, lost that one electron in the valence shell. Let's say it reacted and lost that electron. It now would have 10 protons, 10 electrons, and 11 protons. Protons would win, so the charge would be a plus charge. So, for example, Na, sodium, would have a plus. That's what would happen if it reacted. That would be the charge of the atom. So let's try an element from group 2. Let's try magnesium. Magnesium has 2 electrons in its outer shell. Its ape is 12. If it reacts and loses those 2 electrons in its outer shell, so it will have a stable outer orbital, it would have 10 electrons now. So the protons would be 12 positive, and then only 10 electrons, so its charge would be 2 minus, plus. We are live. Sometimes we make mistakes. So I'm glad you guys are catching me. Okay? So now let's go to sulfur. Sulfur is a nonmetal. Remember, it collects electrons to form negative ions. So it's in group 6. It has 6 electrons in its outer shell. So it's going to collect 2 more. So right now the ape is 16, so it has 16 protons. It would have 16 electrons, but now that it's gained 2 more, it now has 18, so sulfur is going to be a 2 minus. And chlorine, Cl, it has 7 electrons in its valence shell. It's in group 7. It just needs 1 more to become full, to have a full octet, to become stable. So it will react with sodium, for example, and make a sodium, a salt compound. And so it will gain the electron that sodium wants to get rid of, and so its charge will be just a minus. And that is how you do charge of atom, which is different from the charge of the nucleus. All right, guys, that was all about charges. See you in class.